Bleh. Whoa, hey, how you doing? Where am I? I'm in a strange, undisclosed location coming to you live. Actually, this is not live. This is pre-recorded with a very special surprise. I am so stoked to bring this to you. Alex Proyas, one of the best directors out of the 90s. I mean, this dude directed The Crow, but he also did the equally incredible Dark City from 1998. He also did a movie called Garage Days, I, Robot, Knowing with Nicolas Cage. He did Gods of Egypt. He has a studio where he's doing all sorts of really cool independent virtual filmmaking, as well as a streaming platform. Man, I am so honored to have him here on the channel to speak. We spoke about some really cool stuff. He talks about his new project that he's currently crowdfunding. It's in post-production. You're going to hear more about that. This was really a treat. We get into some really deep philosophical stuff, and he's such a good. I asked him some pretty heavy questions at the end, and he gave some really, really thoughtful answers. So, man, just enjoy. Make sure you check out his crowdfunding campaign. Also, check out our Patreon. The Patreon makes everything go. Also, what would an introduction be without talking a little bit about the Patreon? The Patreon is the lifeblood. It contributes to the overhead of all the Frumess operations. It's not something that you want to miss out on. There are unreleased videos and behind-the-scenes videos and videos that are not meant for public consumption on YouTube. You also find missing parts of that Eerie Von interview we did. There's 3 parts of that Eerie Von interview can only be seen on the Patreon. The Lodi Files. What is the Lodi Files? Secret shows. Make sure you check out the Patreon. And again, a big thank you to Alex and Hannah for setting this all up and putting it together. Let's chat with the ladies. Hey guys, what's going on? It's Jeff. So I've decided to make a Patreon. What is Patreon? I don't know how to define a Patreon. Let me look it up. Patreon is a membership platform that makes it very easy for creators to get paid for the things that they're already creating. I want to do it full time. I want this to be my full-time job. In my efforts to make that happen, I've set up this platform. Is it going to work? Is it going to be successful? I don't know, but I would rather try and crash and burn than not try at all. The goal is to create enough passive revenue so that I can continue to do this full-time, uninterrupted. Why? Because I love to do this. I love creating content. I love making videos. I love shooting films. I love doing podcasts. In case you couldn't tell, I love to talk and I never shut the fuck up. So right now I've kept the Patreon incredibly simple. There's 2 tiers, and that may change in the future. The Murdergram is a simple way to extend support for all of the hours and hours of free content on the channel for nothing more than $1. 38 cents goes to Patreon. What's $1.38, eh? It's less than a cup of coffee, but it's a great way that you can show support for very little effort. When you divide that $1.38 by the hours and hours and hours of time spent listening to this endless drivel of content, the dollar cost average works out. Next up is the YouTube Casualty for $6.66. The YouTube Casualty is loaded to the gills. Enjoy the archive ad-free, as well as ad-free early access to special docu-style podcast videos, music reaction commentaries, and the like, a month before they drop on YouTube, loaded with ads, I might add. You're also going to get exclusive content and behind-the-scenes content that is not available on YouTube or anywhere else. So you get to peek behind the veil. And believe me, there's a couple of choice pieces. Most of all, more than anything, whether you join the Patreon or not, I just want to thank each and every one of you that comes to the channel, that watches all the shows, that leaves comments, that participates, that subscribes. That's really the most important thing. This is just trying to find a way to earn a living as an artist. And with that, thank you for my TED Talk. Join the Patreon, because we need you! 66 cents.
I've been blessed with a simple Greek name.
Yes.
Of only 2 syllables, which is very unusual for a Greek person. So there you go.
Right. It's a very, those names can be very extensive, very long.
Oh, yeah.
many syllables.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, welcome to my show. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. The very first thing I want to know personally is, what is the Heretic Foundation, and tell me more about the Mystery Clock Cinema.
Well, Mystery Clock Cinema is my production company that has been around for many years, and produces my films, and any other video content these days, it's called, that I make. Heretic Foundation is not a group of warlocks and witches. It's not a satanic cult, as some people believe. It's actually called Heretic Foundation because we are trying to do things in a very, very different way. We're sort of breaking the model of the filmmaking, of the film industry that we refer to it as, and we're rebuilding it from the ground up. And it's all through the basic underlying structure of virtual production, which I don't know how much you know about that methodology, but it's a way to create entire environments virtually in a computer, and then marry your live action, or sometimes not even your live action, to a environment that is a virtual environment. So the simple nutshell version of that is it breaks the paradigm of production completely and rebuilds it in a new way, which means you can shoot in a small single set. You can you've got a smaller crew. You can shoot faster and more expediently, where you can change locations at the press of a button. And therefore it lowers the whole overhead of production right down, and allows people like myself and many others who have a very visual approach and like to build worlds. I don't need the $150 million budgets that Hollywood insists upon to do that. I can do it for a fraction of the cost and not sacrifice my level of imagination. So that's the simple version that I can give you.
You know what movie actually immediately comes to mind when you talk about that? Well, two things come to mind. One, I'm immediately thinking of, say, a show like The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, which utilizes it's not green screen, it's LED backdrops that you put your actor in, and you can do all sorts of insane things in an incredibly enclosed space. And the other thing that it makes me think of is movies like George Miller's Mad Max Fury Road, which, it wasn't at the beginning. I know you were a proponent of digital cameras very early on. But I believe George Miller shot that all digitally, and a lot of the stuff was done practical, but also he was doing a lot of blending. He was blending a lot of practical stuff with light use of CGI. And while that wasn't an enclosed space, and yes, that was a ginormous production and had tons of moving parts, I do believe that a similar philosophy sort of exists, right? Would you say that's kind of correct a little bit?
Well, I've been doing virtual production since iRobot. iRobot was actually the first big feature film to incorporate these techniques, and it was built for a specific scene where I had Will Smith running around 1,000 robots, and we had no set, we had no robots, we had nothing. It was Will running around.
There was no set for that.
No, and so
Wow.
we developed, my VFX experts on the production developed a methodology, a way of linking the camera, the film camera, was film in those days, to a very crude computer model. So I could actually see when the camera was going to see Will through the lines of non-existent robots, and it was all done in post. Cut to something like, Gods of Egypt, I did entirely virtual on green screen. And then cut to Mandalorian, which has kind of brought this term virtual production into the lexicon, right? But this is stuff that we've been doing for 20 or more years,
Wow.
And what they did on Mandalorian, which was a good value add to the methodology, was incorporated LED screens, right? which have now become part of the way of doing it. Green screen works better for some scenes. LED works better for other scenes. But Mandalorian, of course, and iRobot and Gods of Egypt was the big budget version of all this stuff. And so Heretic is about empowering indie level filmmakers, because the paradigm that's been shifting in the last few years is, and I think Gods of Egypt was partly responsible for killing this in Hollywood, is the big budget original fantasy or science fiction film. Those films are no longer made because sadly, the last few that were made didn't do as well at the box office as the
It's a tragedy.
would have liked, and that's my wheelhouse. That's what I do. I do original fantasies. I like to come up with stuff in my head that's set in some bizarre context and see it realized. That's my mantra as a filmmaker. So a few years ago, I decided, well, how do I make this methodology able to support my type of filmmaking? And of course, as you would know, as you lower the budget of a film, you don't have the suits breathing down your neck and saying,
right.
"Oh, that's
sure."
The fear that comes from working in this genre. Even if I could get the budget for something like this. So now I'm engaged on several projects that are my own IP, that are all set. One set in Edwardian UK. It's a fantasy ghost story, revenge story, set in the 1920s UK. One is set in a fictitious environment that looks a bit like Metropolis, the movie Metropolis, and another one is set in a virtual version of heaven. And I couldn't do any of these projects without this technology that I've developed, or at least streamlined into being useful to that lower end of indie filmmaking.
So tell me a little bit more. I want to touch back to what you were saying, but I want to first discuss for a moment. Tell me about the Indiegogo fundraiser crowdfunding campaign that you were doing for Dark Sister, which is a proof of concept that you will be using plugging this story into this methodology of filmmaking. Tell me a little bit about Dark Sister.
Dark Sister we made 2 short films. We've almost made 2 short films. Dark Sister isn't quite yet complete, but it's getting close. Using this methodology and shooting it in our very humble stage in Sydney, green screen stage. And so it's a proof of concept really for the methodology to show you can do very high-end visuals, sustain a narrative. It's a 25-minute short film in this world where nothing is real. Like literally the only reality, the only thing that's real that we're pointing cameras at are the actors. Everything else, even the furniture that they're using, the car they're driving, the limousine they're in, everything is completely virtually created. And to try and show that and to prove that it is possible to make a film this way on a budget, and I'm really thrilled with the results. I think they're quite extraordinary. The work that our team is creating, I completely buy the reality, and to the point where we're showing people this footage and we have to show the green shot in relationship to the footage for them to understand, because they just look at it and go, "Oh, okay, so what's a VFX in this scene?" They just don't get it because it's done so seamlessly, So that's what Dark Sister is, and then the feature-length version, which is called Sister Darkness, is what we are going to be tackling in the next. That's down the track somewhere. We're going to be doing that next year.
And for anybody who wants to support the production and get more involved from the crowdsourcing side of things, there'll be a link down in the description to the Indiegogo for Dark Sister, where you can learn more about everything and support the creation of this is true indie film these days. It's indie film, but it's not indie by any means, in the sense that you have this very sophisticated methodology. I'm curious to know too, where does so what have you seen the new Avatar, and where does what Jim Cameron does sort of fit into everything that that you're speaking about here in this interview, in terms of like putting actors into like immersive environments that they can't see? Have you seen the newest Avatar film?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think it's extraordinary, and as was the first one in its day.
Yeah.
It's truly immersive in its reality, which is what you aim for.
Yeah.
Look, again, it's the high end of the very high end of the methodologies that we are using. But the thing is, all these methods are becoming more and more affordable, and it's really, now in the last year or 6 months or so, the advent of AI is going to supercharge this stuff even more. I mean, it's really quite amazing what that's going to be able to do.
That was my very,
And
that is what I wanted to
yeah,
ask you
well,
next.
it
Go ahead.
all roads lead to AI. That's the word on everyone's lips at the moment, or the words on everyone's lips. I mean, it's and we've been embracing and exploring those avenues as well. Look, because Heretic we're a small group. We're not a ILM or a Weta or anyone like that by any level of imagination. We're a very small core group of about 12 people, and so we're very nimble and we can move very quickly. I can come in the morning and say, hey, why don't we try this? And in the afternoon we're getting results. Whereas the big companies, it takes a long time for them to steer around. They're like the ocean liner, we're like the speedboat, so we can explore all this stuff very, very quickly. And so there's already, Avatar took years to make, as will the next one take years to make.
Right.
And they plugged into a very specific methodology which embraces all the old techniques. And by old, I mean like, last year's techniques probably. Whereas we are in a position to jump on new things and explore those. So for us, AI right now, and how we're using multiple platforms to talk to each other, to create environments, and also characters. We're starting to get into the character development side of things with AI as well. It's
Mid-Journey.
It's so exciting. Well, it's a combination of several platforms. Mid-Journey is one of them, and they all have. We are embracing them all, and they all have their merits and their downsides. And so we're getting them all to talk to each other and work with each other. So you develop one part in one platform, feed it into another platform, and vice versa. So the human being who has to manage that cross-pollination, and I want to stress human beings are still very important and very much part of this process, that they're as important as ever. But what AI is doing, of course, is expediting the process, allowing one person to create so much more. And look, there's no question that AI is taking some people's jobs away. No question, that's going to happen. I mean, this is foretold by science fiction many years ago, right?
Yeah, but this is just a natural byproduct of technology and human civilization. There's always technology that comes
exactly
along.
right. And that's what I was going to say, is this is the progress that video technology, just as one component, has been on this course for a long, long time. And AI has been used in video production for 20 or 30, 20, 25 years now. So this is just the next level of that. So I don't believe there's anything to fear from it. Some people, yes, of course, some people, their work is going to be severely impacted, but I urge those particular individuals to embrace this technology rather than standing in a corner and fearing it, and using it to supercharge their own creative input, their own creative efforts. I think that's really the healthy way to look at it, and not be too concerned that it's going to destroy humanity, which maybe it will, but if it does, there's nothing we can do about it. Let's party while we can, you know.
Let's party while we can. I mean,
Yeah.
you of all people to talk about AI with and filmmaking, I mean, you're like at the number one on my list, because it's like, first of all, you made iRobot, which deals with the three robotic laws, or whatever, of ethics for robots, as well as the what's it called, the zeroth law, which is
Zeroth law, yeah.
Spoilers if you haven't seen an almost 20-year-old movie. iRobot is basically the idea that AI will try to save, or no, AI cannot, something about inaction. AI will not harm humanity through, and will not harm humanity through inaction as well. And that's basically, go watch iRobot to get the full gist of that. But it's just interesting, because I think at the core of it, the thing that people are so afraid of and getting so charged up about, and all the hysteria, I think it really comes down to that being possibly the most concerning thing. When I think about what concerns me about AI, it's something that it's where AI may not understand nuance. AI may not understand. It may be too literal. It may be not literal enough. And that's where things could go haywire. But at the end of the day, especially when it comes to filmmaking, and, I understand, especially with the WGA strike and everything that's going on right now, and writers are up in arms about very serious issues that could affect, that will affect them. At the same time, I do watch their movies. Like, I was just at the movies the other day with my son. We were at Alamo, and no matter what anybody thinks or doesn't think about Marvel movies, we were watching Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and I'm watching it, and I'm thinking to myself, I started thinking about AI, and I just go, I understand the concern, especially from like a writer's perspective, but I just don't understand how AI could ever capture heart. Or there are just these human things that go into writing that I don't think an artificial intelligence will ever be able to perfectly nail. You need the human element of creativity needs to be there to further flesh out specific nuance that maybe AI will never be able to understand.
Look, I don't think you can say that. I don't think you can ever say that. It's a bit like the scene in iRobot where Will Smith's character says to Sonny, the robot, will you ever be able to, write a symphony? Will you ever be able to write a great novel?
Yeah.
And Sonny says, can you? And, that's an interesting point, because, that's a fundamental kind of misunderstanding of what the creative process is. Look, I don't, none of us know how far it's going to go. I mean, it begs the question of what is intelligence, what is consciousness,
Right. That's the
when
core
will
of it.
when will machines become self-aware? Will they become self-aware?
Right.
We don't know that. We don't know the answers to those questions. There's no question for me, though, on the flip side, that if you feed in 10 seasons of and look, before I say this, I've tried, I jumped onto ChatGPT.
Yeah, ChatGPT.
And went, okay, ChatGPT, let's see you write a script. And it was the most ridiculous experience I've ever had. The worst co-writer I've ever had, I started off going, okay, write me a 100-page script. Off you go. Here are the characters. Boom. Couldn't do it, And then it wrote me the most formulaic, ridiculous thing that I would have had to feed so much stuff into it to align it into something, as you say, with a heart, or something with a human, vision.
Right.
That I might as well just write it myself, or work with a really good co-writer, a human co-writer, which would be much better. However, I believe even now, probably, and ChatGPT is very good at writing, university papers and whatever, because those don't rely on that narrative, that human narrative, that human heart, that human soul to be put into it. But I tell you what, ChatGPT is awfully good at mimicking. So if you feed it 10 episodes of successful TV series, there's no question that if it can't write you season 11, so that even the audience who love that, the fans of that show, can probably not tell the difference, I would be surprised, right? So that's now hitting the WGA hard. And look, I'm WGA,
Right.
don't get me wrong, and I like my WGA, brothers and sisters. So,
Of course.
It's hitting that part of the industry hard. It's going to hit it really hard, and I completely understand why they're trying to stop the floodgates. They're not going to succeed. The floodgates are going to open, right? Because as soon as people can make money or can increase their bottom line, they're going to do it. The corporations are going to do it. There's no way you're going to legislate it, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, he says, look, I'm not concerned about that particular part of it, other than, as I say, for my colleagues in the WGA, who I don't want them to see them out without work. But what I do, I honestly don't care. I mean, I'm only doing my own IP at the moment. I'm writing it all. As I say, I've tried ChatGPT to come up with an original story. It's fucking hopeless, And so for me, I'm using AI in the areas that I can expedite my methodology, which is in the visuals, creating visuals, creating sound, et cetera, et cetera. And I see nothing but upside there, There's an anecdote that I often relate about, in the 1990s, I would go into an elevator in New York City, and there'd be this old guy sitting on a stool who'd say to you, what floor would you like? And you'd say, 27, and he'd press the button for you, right?
Right, of course, yeah.
And that guy was there in that lift before it was automated, when the old days when you had to do
bellhops.
Yeah, and you had to open up the cage.
Sure, I used to use one of those. Yeah.
And the unions were ensuring that he was there till the day he wanted to retire, even though his job was completely redundant, right? There's automation and technology making someone redundant. And I fear that, there's a lot of people in a lot of industries right now who are in that position. So unless you can retrain, move into another area, you're going to end up as that guy in that automated elevator, So, and maybe not even that, because, the corporations are certainly have a much more of a stranglehold on work and unions and stuff these days than they did back in that day in New York City, So there you go. I think that's the simple version of the world we're in right now.
We make stickers, banners, and buttons too, posters and promo cards. There's nothing we can't print for you, from stage backdrops to bass drum heads. We can print on shirts, we can print on hats, we can print on pants. Cheap prices and high quality, quick turnaround times and free shipping. We also offer free artwork support, great customer service, and so much more. RiotStickers.com, Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com, Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com, Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com, Riot Stickers, we are the bomb.
No, that is. And it's really interesting to hear your thoughts, especially just considering all those things. And I wonder, I can only imagine how you've watched AI grow. And AI has probably been on your radar a lot longer than the general consciousness, because from just making that movie. And you just seem like, just from the movies that you make, you seem like you're really into all sorts of philosophical and deep sort of topics. And before we launch into, I really want to talk about Dark City, but before we talk about Dark City, I have, first of all, Nicolas Cage is my favorite actor, my absolute favorite actor. I'm in awe of Nicolas Cage. I have a goal to watch every single Nicolas Cage film at least once, even the ones that he does that are like, the direct to TV ones. I watch everything this man does because I am in awe of his craft. I think I'm at like 60 something out of 127 movies, whatever. So I watch everything. Does not matter if Nicolas Cage is in the movie, I will watch it, including Knowing, which I loved. I did not get a chance to rewatch it before we did this interview, and it'll be a fresh revisiting for me. But I want to know, what was it like to work with this man who, by the way, just to put a period at the end of this question for you, or to a punctuation, in my mind, Nicolas Cage never delivers a bad performance. Nicolas Cage is like tofu. He is going to taste like whatever you season him with. And if he's got a really sharp, good director, it's going to make him fire on all cylinders. And if there's maybe a lesser director or the more trying production, it will, everything will sort of find its level with a guy like Nicolas Cage. He could do no wrong in my eyes. What was it like working with him? What was that experience like? I have to know.
Nick's a great person and an absolutely terrific actor. And it was a joy. It was like one of the most joyful experiences I've had working with an actor. Mainly because other than it's just cool to hang out with Nick, he is fully invested in the story and the character, and he's never for a moment standing away and looking at his performance or the way he looks or anything as Nicolas Cage, the movie star. You know, he just doesn't care about that stuff. He truly is a leading man, but also a character actor. You know, he embraces. And it's wonderful to see what he can deliver, because it is, a lot of the times it's completely unexpected. With almost all other actors, you can kind of go, okay, well, I know where this is going to go. And you've got to step in and actually sometimes challenge them to get something that you're after, or something just to put a different color or a different spin on the character. And it usually revitalizes a scene, which maybe doesn't have a lot in the words to give it momentum. You know, with Nick, that's never the case. He's always coming at it from a completely left field, unexpected way. And he's experimental in his, I call him a surrealist, and he's fully experimental in what he's doing as an actor. He's constantly challenging himself and trying new stuff, which is what I do as a filmmaker. So we're very compatible in that respect. And yeah, no, look, I put him in every movie that I could, if I had the luxury of doing that. But no, it was a complete joy, you know. In many situations where he just make me laugh because of his approach to it all, right? Which is great. You need to laugh on a film.
Sure,
sure. So we're doing a scene in towards the end of the film when, you know, chaos is breaking out and he's driving his truck through thousands of people, right? I think we had 2,000 extras in this scene who were all going nuts because the world's going to blow up and stuff, and they're all running around and trying to save themselves, right? And he's slowly working his way out of the scene. And so we do a take, and then we, you know, stunt people were like throwing themselves off bridges and whatever the hell was going on. We do a take, and then the car guy would jump in and drive the car back so that Nick could jump back in and get ready to go. And so he's back in the car, Nick's back in the car ready for a second take behind the steering wheel. And as we're resetting explosions and whatever the hell we were doing, you know, takes some time. But Nick, rather than going to his trailer ever, he's just sitting in the car with this fixed expression. And so I thought, there must be something going on behind the scenes that's troubling him. So I walked over to him and I said, Nick, and I had to walk through this crowd because he was right on the other end of the shot. And I walked over and I said, Nick, and he's still focused, you know, staring ahead. Nick, is everything okay? You all right? And he goes, yeah. He goes, and I go, but is that, you know, what's troubling you? And he goes, everything. So it's like just that the whole world was blowing up and he was completely in character, you know, and that's what was troubling him. And I took it as being, so basically what that tells you is he was acting the entire time, right, in that car. He didn't want to break out of character. He didn't want to go. And this was for a shot where the car is driving through a crowd. And yeah, we zoom in on him on one lens, so you see his expression. But any other actor, particularly at his level, would have gone off to his trailer, for the half an hour it took to reset the take, broken out of character, and then come back in and looked sad and concerned. But he was focused in the moment for that entire time, which tells you how invested he is in the film, the story, and the character.
Yeah. The last thing I saw Nick in was Renfield playing Dracula. And I read an article about how he shaved down his teeth so that they had 3D printed Dracula fangs. And he wanted to be able to enunciate with the fangs. He didn't want to have fang mouth. Whenever you see someone put in cheap plastic and they're what the fuck, like he wanted to have be able to really speak his dialogue. So he actually had his teeth shaved, and it made me want to see it even more. And man, I mean, he's so great in it. So if you haven't seen Renfield yet, you got to check out Renfield. It's really awesome. And I know I know you're a Dracula guy on some level. So definitely
I haven't seen
check
the
it
film
out
yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Let's talk about Dark City, which has always been just one of my go-to. I got go-to films that every 5 years, 6 years, whatever, I'm like, sit down and just have a good rewatch. And Dark City came to the Alamo Drafthouse, the director's cut, and so I made sure to catch that. And the last time I watched it, it's funny how you have relationships with movies. I first saw it in '98, and then I saw and to me it was I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. I actually watched it because Richard O'Brien was in it, who I love, Rocky Horror and Richard O'Brien, and what an amazing, it's so cool you got to work with him and stuff. And every once in a while I'd revisit, be like, yeah, this is cool. But this last time I watched it, I was blown away. This is probably 2018, I want to say. I was so blown away by what Dark City is. And especially when I think about how Dark City is spiritual, there is a lot of spiritual DNA. The Matrix takes a lot of its spiritual DNA from Dark City. In the same sense of reality and perception and this, that, and the other. And I wanted to know, when you were making the movie, if this is what I pulled out of it when I was watching it. I wanted to know if you were intending this when you were making the movie, this sort of idea about learning what the truth is in life, and then taking charge, accepting it for what it is, and then taking charge of it, and making and doing your best to make it your own, make it your own happiness. Because I feel like that's what's happening in Dark City. Can you speak? Does that make any sense to you? Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly interpret it that way. I mean, it really is, what is the truth? What is reality? Does it even exist? That's the question, and that's something that I've been obsessed with all my life, and I continue to be obsessed with it. I've written this film called Heaven that is set in a virtual afterlife, and it's all the same themes. I think you're filmmakers who have a philosophical take on life and the world tend to just redo the same themes over and over again, even if it's based on other people's original work that they are adapting. They tend to gravitate towards work that speaks to them on the level that they have an underlying feeling about. I don't often go back and look at my films, but I'm in a hotel room and something comes on, and
right,
It's like the car crash. You can't look away, right? Because I'm one of those guys who like, it's never finished, it's abandoned,
Sure.
and I always see the bad stuff, the stuff that didn't work, and rather than the good stuff. But sometimes I'll watch things and I'll be struck by how I go, hey, I've done that like in every other movie I've made. I go, do I actually have an original idea ever, or am I just redoing the same stuff over and over again? But it is an obsession. It is something that I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to find meaning, as I think many of us are, meaning in our existence. And that to me is the reason we're here, is to understand why we're here. Will we ever understand why we're here? I don't know, but it certainly is fun exploring those ideas. So
you know what it is, to even simplify it more. It's like the moment when you find that the big reveal, for anybody who spoilers on a movie that's over 2 decades old. There's they break through the wall. They break through a wall, and it turns out that this entire time, in what should be, I don't know why, if they ever do like a top 10 list of reveals, like Planet of the Apes is really just Earth the whole time. I feel like Dark City needs to be on that list. This crazy sort of Kafka-esque world of night that we've been traversing through, that amorphous and almost like German expressionist to a certain extent, all of a sudden turns out to be a spaceship in outer space, is just one of the biggest what the fucks like ever. And the idea that the main protagonist, who could literally shape reality, he goes, okay, I'm floating through space on a spaceship, in the same way that I guess when you think about Earth, in a way, is a giant spaceship. The first people, if they didn't understand what space was, and they somehow had a ladder and they climbed all the way to the top, to the sky, and expecting heaven, and then they just saw it was space, they would be in a similar sort of scenario. And this idea of like, okay, this is the world, this is what the world is. Then the world is, in the same way that life is what you make it, the protagonist literally decides that he's going to make that life is what he makes it. And he goes and he turns his memories, I guess a dream, it's almost a dream, even though it's like a implanted memory, but he makes it a reality. And what a profound message for life and the lessons of life, in where no matter what your circumstances are, and obviously resources and all sorts of things, logistics, everything can come into play with that. But this idea that life really is what you make it. And that's the ultimate takeaway that I have when I watch Dark City. Life is what you make it. This guy is like, I'm floating in space. Okay, there's no point in trying to escape. I got to turn around and I got to pragmatically do something with this. And it's beautiful, man.
Thank you. And it's definitely the case, I think, in this modern context, that those themes are probably even more pertinent than they were back in the mid-90s when I came up with the idea for the story. But today, I think the interesting part of it is how social media allows everyone to have their own little bubble of reality, right? And that's being used by the corporations to divide us rather than bring us together, because it's to their advantage for that process to occur. This is a fundamental, that's much bigger fear than AI, and how that's affected in a very negative way modern society. And look, the upside, it all has upsides. Splitting the atom had an upside as well. We can have a podcast like this due to social media, etc. But by golly, the downside is substantial.
It is.
Now, of course, with AI, that's going to be used to weaponize social media as well. Obviously,
very nefarious.
So to me, it's this whole quest for meaning and for truth is great if you're trying to arrive at something that really is a truth. But if you're being shepherded into an area
Mm-hmm.
by the algorithms of this world to embrace a reality that's a false reality, then that's of some concern, because, as I say, that will divide us. You know, it goes back, like when I was a kid, everyone could agree on, you know, what was a good film and what was a bad film, right? Everyone could pretty much agree on that. Everyone could agree on what was a good political direction, what was a bad political direction. Today, no one can agree on anything. There's, you know, you pick anything that is, you know, being presented as a way of thinking, and you'll get an equally divided and divisive audience for that thing, you know. And that's down to social media. There's no question that social media has created that world, you know.
Yeah, no, that I mean, it's as I was saying it, as soon as you said social media, I was like, I know where he's going with this. I know where he's going with this. And you're right, it is. It's like it's a double, like anything else, it ends up being a double-edged sword. But just in the way that I told you how much I love Nicolas Cage, I also love Richard O'Brien, huge fan. And what was it like having a guy like that on your set? I mean, what a cool experience that must have been to work with him. How was Richard O'Brien as an actor?
Oh, look, he was great. He was, you know, it's one of the few situations where I actually wrote a character for an actor. As I was
wrote that for him?
I wrote it for him, yeah. As I was writing the script, it was actually not even so much based on what I'd seen him do in Rocky Horror, of course, which is wonderful. But he had this kids show on in the UK, and he played a character a little bit like his character in Dark City,
Mr. Hand,
kind of a somewhat dark and contained villainous kind of character for this kids show, you know. And I forget the name of the show. And I just thought, well, he's the guy, you know, he's that guy. So I wrote it based on Richard's portrayal of that character. And I was, you know, again, blessed that, again, one of the very rare situations where I wrote it for an actor, I cast the actor, you know.
So cool.
Unheard of in most casting scenarios. Usually you go through many, many people before you get the person that you were thinking of, you know. And of course, he was great to work with, really a lovely man. And he actually wrote Dark City, the musical, on the set while we were, I mean, jokingly, he didn't really write it, but he would come up with he'd have his guitar and he'd like come up with a song, and because he just wrote songs all the time, and he would write the occasional song for a scene in Dark City, which he'd play to me and sing. And I had no time, of course, to go, Richard, please write this down, record it. And it's probably been lost to.
If only you had, okay, here's a perfect example of where if you had a cell phone and you could literally pull your cell phone out of your pocket and be like, just get a quick video just to cherish, just to like have, right?
Yeah, and I so wish I could have done that, but I mean, maybe he's got some. I doubt if he has any record of it. He was just doing it for fun. So
that's pretty amazing. And you know, I've noticed, at least in your early work in like The Crow and Dark City particularly, it's something that I always just took note of with these two movies, because there was a time where, you know, I was like, oh yeah, The Crow, oh yeah, Dark City, and then one day I never even noticed that was the same director. And then suddenly I was looking at the miniatures. There's some shots in The Crow where you're scaling up. I think it's to what the villain in The Crow, the big bad. Top Dollar. When I think it's in his lair and it's scaling up, and I'm going, oh my God. And then that's when I checked on IMDb. I was like, of course, that makes so much sense. Same freaking director. Blew my freaking mind.
Well, yeah. As I say, I just redo the same thing over and over again. So,
but it's awesome. Like, I just give me every one of your movies with like some rain, some lightning, and like, hey, let's do this pan shot pan up on a miniature building because it looks really, really, really cool. All right, I've saved 2 questions for the end, and I don't know, you may not want to answer either one of these, and I completely respect and understand if you do not. But I just feel like I'd be so remiss not to at least ask. And the first one is about Gods of Egypt. And I remember when Gods of Egypt came out, and I remember the controversy. And when I was getting ready for this interview, there was a detail that I was not aware of. You did say we started this interview, you mentioned your Greek background, but you did not mention your Egyptian background, which threw in, and here's, again, we've been talking about nuance in a way. No, we haven't been talking about nuance, but we're about to talk about nuance in the sense of just like how things have changed, how people agree and disagree. It was very easy to agree on one thing. Now everybody, what basically everything you were saying before. And I remember thinking back to when that happened in 2016. And I remember it was in my, it was on my radar, something. It was this whole thing about this notion of whitewashing and this, that, and the other. But one detail that was never, ever brought into the conversation, and I'm not here either which way to say anything, have any opinion on it. It was almost a glaring omission, I thought, in that whole conversation, dialogue, whatever you want to call it, is the fact that you were Egyptian and that you are making a movie called The Gods of Egypt, and whether you have white actors in your movie because they're more bankable or whatever the situation is. How does something like that get lost in the conversation, and why does that not, is there not a little more nuance and disturbing about, okay, here is an Egyptian director making a movie about Egyptian mythology. Does the Egyptian get a say in any of this public outrage?
That's a very complex question to answer in 12 minutes, but I'll do my best.
Whatever you feel comfortable saying.
There's a lot of stuff to unpack. I feel comfortable talking about it. It's just trying to get it all, in a soundbite version. Look, firstly, my heritage is I'm Greek Egyptian. My name is Greek. Proyas is a Greek name. Because my father's side of my mother was born in Cyprus. Her family was from Cyprus. Actually, no, sorry, my mother was born in Egypt, but her family was from Cyprus. My father's side, however, goes right back to, we don't know where, Ptolemy, Alexander, Cleopatra. It goes right back, right? Because the Greeks and the Egyptians coexisted very happily for centuries, right? Millennia, in fact. To the point where Cleopatra was, in fact, Macedonian and therefore Greek, and there's been a whole other debacle in the last few weeks about Cleopatra being cast in a particular way, which I won't go into for this. Right. It's been very interesting to watch. So that's where I sit. So Proyas is like Horus. Horus is a Greek. Horus is a Greek name. All the gods in the Gods of Egypt are Greek names for Egyptian gods because they were named at the time of the words that we use to describe those gods were named by the Greek culture. And there is no delineation between Greek. You go back 2,000 years or more, 4,000 years, and there is no delineation between Greek and Egyptian culture. It was really the same thing, and Egyptians, modern day Egyptians who are not ancient Egyptians, who are most, substantially Arab, who basically, took over the rule of Egypt, in the Middle Ages, and the ancient Egyptians, they're still there, and they were all interbred because
Coptic Christians too, right? You have Coptic Christians.
That's the nature. Yeah, as were the Christians. Like my family were Christian, right? As every part of that part of the Middle East, Mediterranean, it's all interbred. No one cares. It's all part of the same world, you know, and race was something that was not even considered as being important. We didn't view it in the divisive way that our modern culture is being forced into viewing it, right? So 2016, around that time when Trump was getting in and all that sort of stuff, this was the ground zero of this bizarre paradigm shift in American culture, specifically American culture, not so much in the rest of the world, where suddenly race became this thing. We were doing so well. I thought we were doing extremely well. I mean, I was aware of the shift between, you know, the 1980s when I first started working in LA, where I actually said to people that I was working with in the production company, hey, why are there any black people working here? You know, and they were like, they all got very embarrassed, you know, to 2016 when, you know, it was a much less divided culture and we were all moving in the right direction, fulfilling Martin Luther King's mantra of don't judge a man by the color of his skin, you know, the content of his character. You know, we were starting to, you know, America was starting to embrace that concept. Suddenly we took a sharp turn when race was the identity and race were the be all and end all. And, you know, I was mere collateral, my film was mere collateral damage, so that when we saw this discourse starting to happen with Gods of Egypt, and it happened with Ridley Scott's film a couple of years earlier, Gods and Kings, I think it was called. Same thing, you know. The way they dealt with it, the way Rupert Murdoch and Ridley Scott dealt with it, when they were said when this Africocentric concept of ancient Egypt was brought up for their film, and they cast white actors. Well, they weren't white; they were white actors. You know, their response was, "Well, we thought Egyptians were white," you know, and that's kind of equally messed up. But look, you know, what I wanted to do, you know, the studio that made Gods of Egypt completely freaked out. My attitude was, let me go on, let me do media and say, hey, I'm Egyptian, okay, here are the real reasons why there is a mixture of different ethnicities in the film. The simple pragmatic results, the simple pragmatic reasons of there ain't enough Egyptian actors, right? Even if we could find the Egyptian actors who looked exactly right in the context of ancient Egypt, that's not what the film is. The film is it's an inclusive of all cultures, because for me, that's just as justifiable a way to portray those people in that context of ancient Egypt and mythological. It's not even real.
It's mythological. It's not historical.
Mythology, right? So I went,
yeah.
You know, if you watch the movie, you'll see that we eventually come out from the entire world, and you realize that Ra is going around this planet that's Egypt on one side and the land of the dead on the other. It's a flat Earth, and I'm like, that was my way of saying, guys, this is not real. This is a fantasy. This is like Star Wars. This is like the first Star Wars, right? And it just happens to use ancient Egypt as mythology, right? You know, but they wouldn't let me do that. The studio wouldn't let me do that because they were shit scared of what was going on. So they chose to make us a sacrificial goat. They went, this film's going to get cancelled. We're going to throw the actors under the bus. We're going to force Proyas to issue an apology, though it went against every one of my you know, feelings of truth to do that. But I did it because we were, you know, we were hitting a world which I didn't understand at all. I didn't see this coming. Right now, in, you know, 6-7 years later, I go, okay, I get what was going on there, and I get the reasons for it. And now we're starting to get a shift in the narrative. But in those days, I probably wouldn't have had a hope in hell. I would have been utterly crucified, and I would have been cancelled as well as the movie, you know. So that's the simplest version I can.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Again, there was a startling detail in that, because I had even forgotten that you had done that movie, and then I remember the controversy, and then I was reading about it. I was just going, I'm like the dude's Egyptian, so like what is that? I mean, it adds so much to the conversation, and you just did a very good job of succinctly describing it. We are out of time, and I want to thank you again for taking the time to sit and chat with me. And again, please make sure to check out the Indiegogo. It'll be in the description of the comments. I have one final question I want to ask for Alex, and again, you may not want to answer this question. You could pass on it. I totally get it. It is something I feel like I would be remiss, my one opportunity to speak with you. And it's about what happened on the set of Rust and them continuing production and completing the film, which is parallels what happened with you guys on The Crow. And I immediately, when I heard about Rust, when I heard what had happened on Rust, when I saw it in the media, I immediately thought of you and that production. And it was shocking that could happen again. And I don't know, what was going through your mind when that exploded on the media after?
Yeah, I was very sad to hear that. That was and shocked, actually.
Of course.
Happened. Look, I don't believe that there's any justification really to use real weaponry on the set of a film these days. I chose not to use real guns on Dark City. By the time iRobot came around, we had incredible safety protocols put in place. We had a very large budget, so we could have multiple armorers, multiple people making sure that nothing would ever happen again. But by golly, by today's era, putting in muzzle flashes is such an easy thing to do. You can do it on your laptop. I mean, it's really, there's no justification for using real guns, particularly on low budget movies, because, I don't care what they say, there's always going to be corners that are going to be cut, just as the corners were cut in the production of of The Crow, and which led to the tragedy. The corners that were cut by the producers of that film definitely contributed to that situation. So, Rust, I bet you, was the same situation. Now, is that negligence? Look, that's a legal question. But I tell you, the right now, in this day and age, as I say, there's no justifiable reason. Take whatever money you're giving to an armorer, or not giving to an armorer, or whatever the hell is going on behind the scenes, and put it into doing some muzzle flashes in post-production. No one's going to get killed. No one's going to get hurt. So that's my simple version of that.
Thank you. I thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. And again, an honor. I've been watching your work a long time, and it's an honor to speak with you, and wishing you great luck in your crowdfunding campaign. I will definitely keep my eyeballs peeled out. I will keep my eyeballs peeled for that.
Thank you.